let's go through a few people that you've known over the years, and that. Tell me about Dave Campbell.
Well, the greatest person I've ever known. The person that once you get to know him, you say to yourself, I want to be more like him. I'd like to be more like, I'd like to be. And that's one of the things I have done for the longest time. I've tried to be more like him. He is just, this is the way he is. In addition, he has this great ability to write and report, which he's done for so long. And his memory of things, his experiences are just incredible. And I'm happy to say he's been one of my best. He's been a mentor and one of my best friends. And I think you could say, and that's someone I love very much.
John McClain.
The first time I met John, I had a little bit of a head start on John because he had gone to MCC, and Tony Peterson came and told me that John was coming and he was going to be taking my first writing class, and that he was kind of rough. He needed some training. So we had first thing I remember, we had a fact sheet. You had to write from a fact sheet and write a story. And when I looked at John's story, I remember almost in every line I had written. And he comes in to talk to me, and I'm going over this story, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm being too hard on him. You know, because I wish I'd saved that page. It was just wonderful. It was just filled with my writing. I get through and I look up, and he says, well, is there anything else you can tell me that will help my writing? And I thought, you know, this guy's going to turn out okay.
Tony Peterson.
Tony also went to MCC. There's a great story about Tony. His high school counselor didn't think he was going to make it in college. Isn't that amazing? At La Vega. And he, one of the Tony's great accomplishments when he was at the Chronicle, he thought that the staff needed to learn Spanish, so they would all go to class once a week. And he became so good at it that later Tony was elected to be the president of the Inter-American Press Association, has now made speeches in almost, if not most, all South American countries. I'm not sure about Brazil. I think he's been to Brazil, but and made the speeches in Spanish. And the guy that his counselor didn't think is going to make it all the way, and is in a great position at SMU, and I'm glad to see him there.
Harry Marsh.
Another great person. Harry's a little older than I was. He was at Baylor in the late 40s, and a great career. He worked for Harding Carter in Mississippi, and then was in New York. He went to Columbia, which got him to New York, and then just came to Baylor. The fact that he was passed over not once or twice for chairman led him to leave and me to leave. If Harry had been chairman, I would have stayed at Baylor.
Dave Chubbins.
He was a father to me because his experience was so enormous. He had gone to Baylor in the 20s. He took off a year and went to South America as a correspondent for United Press. Came back and graduated. Married into the Dawson family. Alice Dawson was J.M. Dawson's daughter. And long history with the AP, including covering Lyndon Johnson longer than anybody else. From the time Lyndon Johnson was in Congress through his presidency, and Johnson spending a lot of time with him, calling and talking to him, and all. And he only talked occasionally about the Immortal Ten, because after a while it became difficult for him to tell the story over and over again. So I was fortunate to hear his story of surviving the bus crash at Round Rock in detail, at least on one or two occasions. But he had some of his health problems were left over from the accident that occurred. Think about that. It's not generally known, or people don't remember this that much anymore. It's important to know. One of the person killed in Round Rock was Jack Castello, and he was from Ennis, and his family owned Ennis Business Farms. And Dave was trying to find money to build a new building for journalism, and the Castello family gave the money, thanks to Dave. We had been in we had been in former dorms. We're in Harrington Hall before we moved into the Castello building, and it was Dave's relationship with the Castello family that caused that building to be there, and I'm sure people see the writing and say, oh yeah, the Castello, big deal, but that was it is a big deal.
Tony Castro.
Tony is an incredible writer. He has written several books. This is his latest book about DiMaggio and Mick. He was raised in Waco. He's at 2525 South 25th Street. And a great career. He was a columnist at one time for the Herald Examiner in Los Angeles. He's done a whole series of books, including a memoir about growing up in Waco. And he's one of these people who can go home this afternoon and come back tomorrow with a book. I never saw anybody who could write as much and as quickly as he can. And I saw him in August in Los Angeles, and still keep up with him.
Thomas Harris, the novelist.
Tom came from Mississippi, and he one of the this is interesting that we used to do registration. We used to have a table, and people came up and registered. And he comes up to register for some advanced class in journalism, and to me, and I tell him, I listen, you got to go to the first class too. You got to take Mr. Chevin's introduction to reporting class first. And he said, okay. Meanwhile, he'd gotten a job at the Waco News Tribune, and he worked covering the police. And so as time passes, he leaves Waco and went to New York. He got a job at the AP, thanks to Jules Lowe, who had worked there in Waco before. And his first book, Black Sunday, you don't see the movie. They don't show the movie anymore. It might give terrorists an idea that people pay attention to it. But of course, he's most famous for The Silence of the Lamb. He decided after he had become famous that he wasn't going to give any interviews. He'd never given interviews. And unfortunately, he decided to not communicate with people on a daily basis, which is okay. And when I went to Columbia last year to get the award, I hoped he'd come, but he was in Miami and couldn't come. It would have been great to have him come to that event.
Is there anybody else I should ask? Pat Doherty.
Pat was the longtime editor of the Anchorage Daily News. He's from Houston and came to Baylor, and he married a great woman named Kay Brown, and they went to Anchorage together right after they graduated, and worked at first at the paper now in existence, the Anchorage Times, and then went to the younger newspaper, the the Anchorage Daily News and was editor during the time that Sarah Palin was the was the governor, just giving him lots of problems, and had a great career. Terrific guy. And Neiman, he and Tony Castro were both Neiman fellows, by the way.
Henry Holcomb.
Probably the best reporter I ever taught was Henry Holcomb. He was his dad was a Baptist minister. His grandfather was the head of the Sunday School Board of the Southern Baptist Convention. His dad was a pastor in Dallas, and Henry was the most natural reporter ever. Great career in Philadelphia, in Detroit, in Philadelphia, and as the managing editor of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Just a terrific career. The best writers, let me tell you about best writers. The best writer from Baylor was Tommy West, who's no longer with us. And if you ask anybody of that era, you ask Thomas Harris or Tony Castro or Tony Peterson, Tommy West, great writer. He worked in Waco, Houston, Cincinnati, and Philadelphia.
Judy Cartwright.
Judy was from Dallas. She went to she got a job first in one of the suburbs of New York, and then went to Newsday, and has only recently retired, and was there. She had almost every major job except being editor in about a 35 or 40, maybe 40-year career there at Newsday in Long Island, and it was a great newspaper person, and a terrific person, and a good friend also.
Sherry Boyd Castlewell.
Sherry, oh, I'm so sad about losing Don. I almost can't talk about this, but Sherry and I met when I first came to Baylor, and we're still friends today. And I wish people knew what she's done about the providing lunch for people in Waco, and they would, somebody would give her money and go help her. If I lived in Waco, I'd go work over there every week at the lunch place.